Doctors, let's go on. The second part of our lecture is gluten disorders. What are the main, can you see a screen, doctors? Doctors,
Yes,
can you see a screen?
Yes, yes.
Good. General characteristics of singleton disorders are the following. First one is a Mendelian type of inheritance. Second one, a wider range of disease onset. Next one, chronic progressing cause of disease. And genetic heterogeneity and clinical variation of diseases. And etiological approach to treatment is potential available, so-called gene therapy. And prenatal diagnostic is also available for majority of gene diseases. So we know that single-gene disorders associated with variation, clinical variation of gene diseases such as onset of clinical symptoms, wide spectrum of symptoms and syndromes, variable gravity of severity and degree of progressing disease, variable responses to treatment. What are the main types of inheritance of single gene disorders? They are autosomal recessive, autosomal dominant, X-linked dominant, X-linked recessive, Y-linked, and mitochondrial inheritance. Deletions ranging from 1 to megabases. 1 in 2 megabases, insertions including duplication, frame shift can be produced by deletions, insertions, or splicing errors. Dynamic mutations are tandem repeats that often change size on transmission to children. What are the main classes of mutation? They are missense mutation. Missense mutation characterized by replace of one amino acid to another in the gene product. Nonsense mutation, replace in amino acid codon with the stop codon. Splice site mutations create or destroy signals for exon intron splicing. Deletion of the whole gene, nonsense mutations, and frame shift are almost certain to destroy the gene function. Mutation that change the concept GTAG nucleotide flanking most introns affect splicing and will usually abolish the function of the gene. Many other sequence changes can affect splicing, but in ways that are much harder to predict. A missense mutation is more likely to be pathogenic, or if it affects a part of the protein known to be functionally important. Changing an amino acid is more likely to affect function if that amino acid is conserved in a related gene, so-called orthologs or paralogs. Amino acid substitutions are more likely to affect function if they are non-conservative, replace a polar by a non-polar amino acid or an acidic by a basic one. So on this slide, you can see mutations affecting the cytoplasmatic domain of the low-density lipoprotein receptor in familial hypercholesterolemia. And as an example, you can see here a nonsense mutation associated with presence of stop codon, frame shift associated with insertion of 4 bases, and missense mutation. What are the main phenotypic outcomes of gene mutation? First one, mutation within a gene affects structural and functional state of protein or enzyme through different ways. Second one, mutation can impair protein or enzyme biosynthesis, leading to a decrease in levels of protein product, like mutation in regulatory sites of gene. Mutation can affect protein or enzyme activities, such as mutation in the coding sequence of gene. Heterozygous carriers of mutation process usually have on 50% decreased activity levels of protein enzymes in comparison with wild type or normal genotype. Mutation within intron exon boundaries can impair the splice sites therapy, leading to processing protein or enzyme isoforms with different activities. Mutations in different sites of a gene may affect different physical and chemical properties of protein products, like enzymatic activity, substrate specificity, thermostability, etc. Decreasing in protein or enzyme activity strongly correlates with expression of pathological phenotype in patient, and metabolic outcomes of gene mutations may be following: accumulation of substrate in blood, urea, or other biological fluid before the biochemical blockade, deficiency of product after the biochemical blockade, receptive metabolism for alternative pathways. Classification of inheritable metabolic diseases. We know hereditary metabolic diseases of amino acids, for an example, alkaptonuria, homocystinuria, phenylketonuria, metabolic diseases of carbohydrates such as galactosemia, lactic acidosis, hereditary fructose intolerance, hereditary metabolic diseases of lipids such as familial hypercholesterolemia, cerebrositosis, hereditary metabolic diseases of purine and pyrimidine bases such as Lesch-Nyhan syndrome, hereditary metabolic diseases of glucocorticoid hormones such as adrenogenital syndrome, for an example, or hypoaldosteronism, hereditary metabolic diseases of porphyrin and bilirubin, such as Gilbert syndrome, hereditary metabolic diseases of connective tissue such as Marfan syndrome, Ehlers-Danlos syndrome, hereditary metabolic diseases of metals such as Wilson-Konovalov, Menkes syndrome, familial periodic paralysis, hereditary metabolic diseases of erythroid tissue such as hemolytic anemia, glucose 6-phosphate dehydrogenase deficiency, Fanconi anemia. So, and now we'll speak about some single gene disorders. First one, phenylketonuria. Phenylketonuria is inheritable pathology of enzyme called phenylalanine hydroxylase. Mutation in gene encoding phenylalanine hydroxylase lead to accumulation of phenylalanine, phenylpyruvate, and phenylpyruvate is toxic for central nervous system. That's why we can see in this patient central nervous system affection, mental retardation. Also, a defect of phenylalanine hydroxylase leads to deficiency of tyrosine. Deficiency of tyrosine leads to deficiency of melanin and albinism, and deficiency of tyrosine lead to deficiency of thyroid hormones, dopamine, and different neurological symptoms. Second one disorder is galactosemia. Galactosemia is hereditary intolerance to galactose. The prevalence of this disorder is around 1 in 15, 1 in 20,000. We know that we know different types of galactosemia depending on mutation in different genes. First type of galactosemia is associated with mutation in gene encoding galactokinase. This enzyme converts galactose to galactose 1-phosphate. Second type of galactosemia associated with mutation in gene encoding galactose 1-phosphate uridyl transferase. And this mutation associated with biochemical blockage of transformation of galactose 1-phosphate to glucose 6-phosphate. Third type of galactosemia is associated with mutation in gene encoding galactose 4 epimerase. This enzyme involved in transformation of non-active form of galactose 1-phosphate uridyl transferase to active form of galactose 1-phosphate uridyl transferase. Marfan syndrome is an inheritable disorder of fibrous connective tissue. Marfan syndrome shows striking pleiotropism and clinical variability. The cardinal features occur in 3 systems: skeletal, ocular, and cardiovascular. Prevalence of this syndrome is 1 in 10,000, 15,000. And this syndrome is associated with craniofacial dysmorphias and dislocated lens. Patients with Marfan syndrome have increased height, disproportionately long limbs and digits, anterior chest deformity, mild to moderate joint laxity, vertebral column deformity such as scoliosis and thoracic lordosis, a narrow, highly arched palate with a crowding of the teeth. So pathogenesis of Marfan syndrome is associated with mutation in gene encoding fibrillin-1. Mutation in this gene lead to diencephalic disorders such as increased height, disproportionately long limbs and digits. Also, mutation in this gene lead to abnormalities of connective tissue proteins, such as skeletal changes, kyphosis, scoliosis, and thoracic lordosis, mild to moderate joint laxity, and spontaneous pneumothorax. So homocystinuria is another disorder of metabolism. This is hereditary disease associated with abnormal metabolism of methionine. The prevalence of this disease is 1 in 50,000, 250,000. This syndrome is associated with different craniofacial and musculoskeletal abnormalities. Homocystinuria is a metabolic disorder due to cysteine beta synthase deficiency, producing increased urinary homocysteine and methionine. Major clinical manifestations involve the eye and the central nervous, skeletal, and vascular systems. Patient with homocystinuria have stenic stagia, dolichostenomelia, pes cavus, achondrodactyly, T abnormalities. Pathogenesis of homocystinuria associated with blockage of cystathionine beta synthase, and it leads to increasing synthesis of proteoglycans, different disorders of connective tissue, leading to central nervous cardiovascular disease abnormalities, bone deformities, and dislocation of lenses. Blockage of cystathionine beta synthase also lead to increased synthesis of cystathionine, metabolic affection of central nervous system, and diencephalic disorders, and also blockage of cystathionine beta synthase lead to accumulation of methionine and metabolic affection of central nervous system and diencephalic disorders. Accumulation of homocysteine in tissues also lead to effects or defects of vascular wall. It's also activate Hageman's factor and lead to thrombosis, infarcts of organs such as heart and brain. What are the main methods for diagnostic of singleton disorders? So, first one is clinical examination of patients and their relatives. Second one is anthropometric measurement of patients and their relatives. Also, genealogical investigation and analysis of pedigree. Next one, biochemical or metabolic test of patients or relative samples may be used. And the main method is DNA diagnostics of blood samples. We know that molecular genetic methods allow us to detect any type of mutation in patient with a singleton disorder, as it's most effective and can help us to detect the type of mutation. Also, for diagnostic of metabolic singleton disorders, we can use methods of biochemical diagnostic. This method allows us to measure the levels of different pathological metabolites in biological fluids, such as fasting and the specific diet. Biochemical method also can may be associated with the comparison of physical and chemical properties of normal and mutant proteins. Also can help us to analyze the conformation and amino acid composition of mutant protein, to analyze the functional activity of different proteins or enzymes, to measure the velocity of substrate metabolism, for an example, and also screening test. Newborn screening can help us to detect singleton disorders. First of all, diseases of abnormal metabolism, of affected metabolism. In newborns, we use newborn screening for some singleton disorders. As a rule, it's most frequent and most severe diseases. This screening is the process of testing newborns babies for treatable genetic diseases. Newborn screening has been adopted by most countries around the world through the lists of screen diseases very widely, anywhere from 1 disorder to more than 100 diseases. We know two types of screening in newborns. It's total and selective screening. Common consideration in determining whether to screen for disorders are the following. First one, a disease that can be missed clinically at birth. Second, a high enough frequency in the population. A delay in diagnosis will induce irreversible damages to the baby. A simple and reasonable reliable test exists. Treatment or intervention that makes a difference in the disease is detected earlier. And a screening test must be sufficiently sensitive to avoid false negative results, and yet specific enough to avoid false positive results. To be employed on a large scale, the test must also be safe, simple, and fairly inexpensive. Targeted diseases, there are well-established programs for screening all neonates to identify those affected by conditions such as phenylketonuria, galactosemia, hypothyroidism, congenital adrenal hyperplasia, cystic fibrosis, where early diagnosis and treatment is successful in preventing disease complications. The value of including metabolic disorders in screening programs depends on the incidence of the disorder and the prospect of altering the prognosis by its early detection. The main summary and conclusions. First one, metabolic processes in all species occurring steps, each being controlled by a particular enzyme, which is the product of a specific gene, leading to the concept of one gene, one enzyme. A block in a metabolic pathway results in the accumulation of metabolic intermediates and or deficiency in the end products of the particular metabolic pathway concerned, a so-called inborn error of metabolism. The majority of the inborn errors of metabolism are inherited as autosomal recessive or X-linked recessive traits. A few are inherited as autosomal dominant disorders involved rate-limiting enzymes or cell surface receptors. A number of the inborn errors of metabolism can be screened for in the newborn period and successfully treated by a dietary restriction or supplementation. Prenatal diagnostic of many of the inborn errors of metabolism is possible either by conventional biochemical methods or the use of special DNA marker and molecular genetic diagnostics. Doctors, have you any questions?
No, ma'am.
Doctors, everybody, pass me.